I know it's been less than a week since the last time we had made a video about this guy, Seattle Kraken, 4th overall pick, Shane Wright. Last video we went over the entire story from a year ago until now, but today we have ourselves some really interesting news as to what could be the situation here with Wright. Now, long story short, Shane Wright is a hockey player that is probably too good for the OHL, but he may not be good enough just to solidify an NHL role just yet. I know in the last video I said myself that if I were in charge, and I'm not in charge, which is very much why I'm sitting in my bedroom making YouTube videos instead of running an NHL team, if I was in charge, I would not see a problem with giving Shane Wright a top 6 opportunity in the NHL and give him an extended amount of time in that role. I definitely do believe in the future of Wright. But the unfortunate truth is, not everybody feels the same way that I do. And the Seattle Kraken themselves have expressed that for Shane Wright, they feel it's more developmental for him. They feel there's more necessary time away from the NHL that should be given to Wright. That AHL experience, some more time in the OHL, World Juniors experience, it's all going to benefit him in his long-term projectability. Which is respectable. It's totally okay. But last season you saw the Seattle Kraken jumping through hoops and hurdles to try to get Shane Wright on the proper path, and for the most part, it worked. He had AHL time, he had OHL time, he had AHL playoff time, and he had World Junior time. But for next season, the question was simple. What was next? Where would the Kraken go with this guy? Would they give him that NHL spot? Would they send him back down to the OHL? Would they try to jump through hoops and hurdles again to try to get him back in the AHL? Because he is a 19-year-old CHL athlete, and because of the certain stipulations that exist between the NHL and the CHL, he's not allowed to go to the AHL. That's just not allowed. But what if I told you he might actually be allowed this time? And the hoops and hurdles that we had talked about might not actually be necessary. Let's head over to the Seattle Kraken subreddit, because what user Sic Semper Tyrannis goes out there and posts about is a rumor talking about how Shane Wright's AHL eligibility might actually be close. The source here is NHL to Seattle, John Barr. He runs soundofhockey.com, and he is an NHL resource in the Seattle area. On the recent episode of the Sound of Hockey podcast, he goes out there and says this: I believe Shane Wright is going to play in the AHL for 23-24, and I believe we're close to hearing confirmation that he will be eligible to play in the AHL. Now, the Reddit poster goes out there and says, Sound of Hockey, John Barr could just be speculating on this. He didn't say I know, but Barr is someone who is close to the team and organization, and it's possible he has heard something behind the scenes. The timing is also just logical. Camp starts in September, and all involved need to know where Wright can play in the next few weeks. Even without Barr saying anything, I think it'd be safe to assume a decision one way or the other would happen soon. If Barr is so confident that Wright will be AHL eligible, then that raises my hopes that he would be. The segment is at 16:18 of the 249th episode of the show. You could listen to the episode as it's linked in the body of the post. There also is some more background in the comments section here. The NHL and the CHL have an agreement that says that players have to be a certain age or have a certain number of CHL years played before they can be sent to the AHL. Unless they meet those requirements, an NHL team's options are to bring the player up in the NHL or send them back to the CHL. The purpose of this is to keep talent in the CHL to help that league sell tickets, as people want to see high-profile players. The Kraken had this problem last season, and it's why Shane Wright kept bouncing around between so many places. He wasn't ready to be in the NHL full-time, and he didn't have anything left to learn in the OHL. Now, before we proceed with the rest of this comment, because there is a lot more meat to the bone here, the idea of Shane Wright breaking the NHL-CHL agreement of AHL eligibility sounds crazy. But if there were a guy to do it, this would be the guy. There's literally nothing left that he needs to learn. And when it comes to Wright and his projectability long term, you could debate that maybe sticking around in the CHL would actually be hurtful to him. You know how some guys could sometimes over-marinate and get a little bit too good, a little bit too soon, and as a result they might be a little bit less able to adapt as their career goes on because they're so used to being dominant? Not saying that Shane Wright needs to go the hard route and that he's not good enough to play in the NHL, but if he spends another season in the OHL, who knows what could happen with his development long term. You don't want to rush guys like these, of course, but you don't want to give them too much time. And when it comes to Wright, he was already pretty good in the AHL last season, and that's against men in the NHL's developmental league. So if he's going back to the CHL, he's probably got so much dominance left in him against teenagers that it might not be all too worth it for him to actually explore that option. Let's go back over onto the Reddit comment here. Wright is a unique case for several reasons. First, he was given OHL exceptional status, which means that he was so good he started playing in the OHL a year earlier than most players. However, he and a lot of other OHL players lost an entire season due to the virus. He was also a single game short of meeting the CHL's normal games played requirement to qualify last season as a season played. He had an injury and his team got swept in the first round of the playoffs, giving him only 24 OHL games played, just short of the 25-game requirement. If he had played one more game in the OHL last season, he would have had the necessary qualifying seasons played and be AHL eligible. So pause. The OHL rule states that for a certain amount of time, a player has to stick around in the CHL. Okay, cool. Shane Wright would have been one game played away from fulfilling that requirement, even with the pandemic season lost, because this guy was exceptional status eligible and he had played a year earlier in the CHL in general. Because he had gotten injured towards the middle part of last season, he did not have a full season, quote-unquote, and not a 25-game season in the OHL, meaning that he was one game short of being able to just play in the AHL next year normally. Ron Francis has apparently been working the last few months to get the OHL to grant Wright a special waiver given these unique circumstances so that he can be assigned full-time to the Coachella Valley Firebirds. That is probably the best development path for Wright, since there really is not a spot in the top 9 forwards for him right now on Seattle. There's a more detailed analysis on the soundofhockey.com show, or not the show, but the article that's linked, so I will leave a link in the description if you want to read more about that. But long story short, Shane Wright is a lot closer to the AHL than some of us might have thought. And for me personally, this is probably the way to go when it comes to choosing the path for Wright. If you're really dead set on your top 6 in Seattle being the way it is, with Beniers, Eberle, McCann, Wenberg, Burakovsky, Jaden Schwartz, then okay, that's good. And it's a really good set of forwards. Y'all were a pretty good team last year, so there's no reason to doubt that. But for Shane Wright, your 4th overall pick that was supposed to be 1st overall in the 2022 NHL Draft, a guy that was touted to being an NHL superstar ever since he was 16 years old and beating Connor McDavid's point-scoring record in the OHL. Ever since that happened, there were a lot of expectations for this guy, and rightfully so. But this previous season was so weird, above and beyond weird, that it's tough to try to figure out where to go from here. Just playing in the AHL and the World Juniors and the OHL isn't enough to guarantee NHL stardom just yet, so giving him that AHL season next year is a must. He has nothing to learn at the OHL level, he is not going to get better. So AHL next season, if that's the full-term plan, then okay, great. And what does this mean for his contract situation? Well, I don't actually know. I don't think it would burn off the first year of his ELC if he plays a year in the A. I'm not necessarily too sure there. Somebody's going to have to educate me in the comment section below how that's going to work out. Let's say Shane Wright plays a full 70-game campaign in the AHL and only plays like 5 NHL games on a call-up because somebody is injured or something. If that's the case, what happens with his ELC? We already knew that the ELC slid from last year to this year after the NHL sample because he didn't play the full 9 games. Is that still going to be the case? Is AHL eligibility also in that same realm? Because if you're able to slide down Shane Wright's ELC for a second year, and the rest of his development goes as planned, let's say Shane Wright becomes a good NHL player in 24-25 or 25-26. If you don't have to worry about re-signing him right away at that time frame, then that seems like the ultimate 3D quantum mechanics chess move that you could pull off. Ron Francis, I'm leaving it to you, buddy. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're a Kraken fan, what are your opinions about this Shane Wright thing between the NHL and the AHL? What are your thoughts about him actually being granted a potential waiver to go to the AHL full-time? Does this surprise you? Does this not? Are you looking forward to this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.